schools are stiff arming it. And it's like, look, you have some of the biggest names in sports. And if you would allow them to actually work with you instead of trying to skirt around, you can also increase your brand awareness, brand value, brand engagement.
This is episode 5, season 2.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into it. What's up, everybody? My name is Adam Cook. There's Sean Ellenby, special guest Eric Hrubes. You heard it here first. Episode 5, season 2 of the NIL show. Excited to jump right into it. We are joined by special guest Eric Hrubes, who is the newly minted Director of Licensing and Corporate Partnerships here at Campus Inc. What's going on, Eric?
Oh, it's going, guys. It's been a ride, a month, man, over a month in already, and it's been a wild ride, but it's drinking from a fire hose. But I'm loving every second of it.
It's hard to believe it's only been a month. Hard to believe it's only been a month.
Yeah,
like, I feel like you've been here a while.
Oh yeah. No, I feel like I'm a part of the team now. Like I feel a newbie, but it's like, all right, it's go time. So loving it. It's been fun.
You know, you jump in with both feet. It's not very long before you feel like the veteran around Campus Inc. because we've been growing a lot. As of yesterday, actually, you're not even the newest employee at Campus Inc. any longer.
I don't feel good.
Where'd you come from, Eric?
I'm born and raised from Iowa. Grew up in a small town of 4,000. Anyone that knows me knows that I always like to throw out our claim to fame, Winnebago Industries. The Winnebago is not everyone says a Winnebago. That's in my hometown. Otherwise it's a motorhome. It's just like Kleenex or tissue, So
it's like champagne, right?
Right. I like to throw that nugget out there. At least it puts us on the map a little bit. So I grew up in a small town, went to a community college, found my interest in sports marketing after working at a car dealership and going to an Iowa Hawkeye game and actually delivering a car for a giveaway at the University of Iowa. So that was a prize. So I found out what sports marketing was through working a car dealership. Who would have thought, So fast forward, then I decided to transfer and go to the University of Northern Iowa, go Panthers, and was fortunate enough to be an intern, worked from the ground level, doing all the banner work, hanging all the banners game days, getting ready for on-field promotions. And then I, decided to, study sports marketing at UNI, and proud to say that I'm the first actually graduate to graduate with a sports marketing degree from UNI. I created my own.
Patient zero.
Right. Yeah. I kind of created my own path. So I had to pivot a little bit, just enjoyed college too much and found that I needed to, look at a curriculum from another college that offered sports marketing. And, found my way. I pivoted and, got it done. But through that entire time, was fortunate enough to stay with UNI Athletics, working an intern. I actually found myself to get into a master's program and got a full ride through UNI and was a GA for the athletic department. And then right after I graduated, I was hired on as an assistant director in the marketing department.
How the heck does one end up in licensing in the first place? I can't imagine when you first started working in marketing, you're like, yeah, licensing is where I want to be. It's not a different world once you're in that marketing realm, but where did that first start? How did that come out?
No, that's a great question, Sean. Like, I never thought, I had no clue what licensing was. I'm from a town of 4,500. I just found out what sports marketing was, for God's sake. So, I would say after UNI, and I should have got into this, I was hired on. I followed one of the gentlemen that hired me at UNI and was hired on at South Dakota State University, and hired on as an assistant AD of sports marketing and promotions there. And then couldn't convince my fiance at the time to stay in South Dakota. So that's how I found out what licensing kind of really was all about. I never really touched licensing when I was in marketing. I was probably a vendor of maybe some licensing directors back in the day, not looking at it. But yeah, I was fortunate enough to get a position at Licensing Resource Group at the time. LRG. I had an office in Coralville, hired on, got a connection through a former intern and worked at LRG. And through my 10 years in licensing, we went through 3 acquisitions and mergers. So if you've ever been through it, never easy. And you just gotta, stay in it and stay positive. And I was fortunate enough, it was some tough times going through that. And I was fortunate enough to stay employed, to stay with it. So I bounced from LRG. Then we were acquired by Learfield Sports. And then they acquired our competitor, SMA, or Strategic Marketing Affiliate. Then they merged us together to form Learfield Licensing. What's up, Steven? And then the most recently 50-50 acquisition merger was with IMG and Learfield to form, obviously, what today is CLC. So
I've got to let those of you who are just listening know Stephen Farrig, CEO of Campus Inc., just parachuted in. Could not miss this conversation with Eric Hrubes. And both of us are rocking the Boo High merch today. So shout out to Cressetco, Boo High, Scrubs with Meeting. Sponsor us on the next episode.
I was going to say that.
Anyway, making it through 3 acquisitions, Eric, I think is a huge testament just to you got to be a pretty stellar employee to make it through 3 companies in one role. And then, obviously still sticking it out with CLC. And you were actually one of our reps and account kind of managers, I guess, at CLC with a couple of our properties. So you had been there for a while. What was it like? What was harder, going through the mergers and acquisitions or sticking with licensing and CLC through the NIL shift?
Yeah, that's a great question. I never thought about it that way. I think the mergers at the beginning is the toughest because some of these private equity companies that come in there, they're not looking at people what they're doing actually for their positions. It's more of how do we eliminate headspace. So I think that's the toughest part because I had a lot of great colleagues when we were Learfield Licensing, that weren't fortunate enough to stick around. And they were willing to work with it, but that was probably tough for me, was going through that. But NIL is certainly, it's still in its infancy where nowhere near where we think it could go, but it's still fun. It's still so new and fresh that I have now a new, fresh perspective on NIL now with joining Campus Inc., obviously. So
can I go on record and say I don't poach these amazing people? They come to us.
Just want to be clear.
For the record, officially.
I don't want to get this reputation. I'm out just finding all these companies that I'm going to their all-stars and be come there. Can I just set the record straight?
I would be happy to set the record straight on that, Steven. So it all goes back to, and it's kind of fun, Adam, to see how we were able to connect. We got, I found out about Campus Inc. through one of the schools, like Adam was saying, through Florida Gulf Coast. They wanted to add the license. I was like, Campus Inc., don't know too much about them. Let me do some research. And that's where did some fact finding that, Adam and I were able to connect. And I was a huge proponent for the company, just, sitting on a few presentations, seeing how you guys were looking at NIL. And really, it wasn't just, what a lot of others were doing, where it was looking at the key sports and athletes, but holistically looking at the entire, athletic department and how do we create an opportunity for every student athlete. So giving my world was really that group of 5 mid-major. I wanted every one of our schools, all 85 that fell under my umbrella, to hey, and that's where Adam had to be all right, I don't know if we can move that fast, but let's see what we can do and try. And I was just a huge, almost was a sales rep for Campus Inc. because I just really enjoyed the story, just the direction the company was going, and just how you guys were going about NIL. And really that's what led to this conversation, seeing the opportunity with licensing. Never thought I would maybe leave CLC. Obviously, it's a very sound company, what established, I should say, company. There's a comfort level there, but I was very impressed, and in more conversations, obviously with you, Steven, Adam, and even you too, Sean, like when we were going through it, like you peel the layers back of the onion of Campus Inc. and it's amazing. Like it blew me away. So that's where I was like, I got it. I got to, join. I want to, be a part of building something where, I was coming from something established, and really it was just like, don't lose a school. Now it's like, all right, how do we go gangbusters and find those opportunities? So I love it. Is that a you, Adam? It has to be you.
We're getting a new appearance on the show.
I love it. Another guest appearance.
Yeah, we had jailbreak. Sorry. Jailbreak into the podcast studio.
He's just wishing you a late happy birthday, Adam.
Yeah.
There he is.
For us, when we talk to licensing companies, or like, they're still figuring it out too. Right? Because from submitting one design to now submitting essentially 200 designs, if you've got to do a custom player number, all that stuff. What do you feel like when CLC heard about NIL, right? What was their initial reaction? Was it excited? Was it, oh shit, there's way more work to be done here? Was it opportunity? Like, who groaned? Who got excited? You don't have to name names, obviously, but what was the sentiment?
Name the names.
No. What was the sentiment? And CLC was going through a lot of changes at the time too, but like, what was the general sentiment from someone outside Campus Inc. in the industry?
Yeah, I would say from CLC's perspective, I applaud Corey Moss. Like, he was a huge leader in this, given, they were doing everything with the video game in per se. So, with EA Sports, and we all know what happened with that. But I think what it was at the time was this came out. They had a lot of conversations with a lot of different figures in the sports industry space, from commissioners to ADs. And I think, really CLC, how we were looking at it at the time was how we can create an opportunity for our schools. How do we bring this to life for a school? And the biggest part of that was fact finding from the schools and their interest level. But at the very minimal, it was just creating a license type to roll out there for schools that they can accept or deny, and depending on where they were at and what was going on their state level. Do I approve the use of NIL with our marks or not? So it was kind of just laying all that groundwork out of one, obviously NIL is rolling out. As an institution, allow the use of marks with the player or student athlete's name, image, likeness or not. And if not, really CLC's role was no part. Like, unless it was going to be using marks, we had no part of it, because that's what we are contracted to do, is license the use of the student or the university's mark. So if we're not allowed to use marks with the student's NIL, then that pretty much our handling it was diminished. So
and we quickly learned we didn't want to do that either.
Right. So how cool. It just, you saw a lot of these companies, like, and it was a lot of more local that I was seeing is, I don't know. In reality, it's kind of a way to make a quick buck. Like, I'm gonna reach out to student athlete. I'll pull something out. You saw a lot of bookstores starting to buy into those local companies, and just maybe phrases that the student athlete was using, a very generic silhouette or something of the student athlete without the actual, IP, the intellectual property of the school. So it just looked kind of boring. And it's like, all right, let's figure this out. Like, it's going to look a lot better if we're all together in this thing. This would be a great way to help student athletes build their brands, but then connect to the university that they're excited to be playing for. So.
Well, I think the exciting thing that, you have recognized in the space, and I know you've been an advocate for your partner schools, and then also being on this side, you've got a lot of great ideas that we'll dive into about where you hope licensing goes in this space. But, you see this all the time. In the MLS, we call it the Leo Messi effect, right? Bedard is supposed to be the biggest hockey player since Wayne Gretzky, and the Blackhawks are saying, the Connor Bedard effect is real in terms of the effect on our brand, the increase in fan engagement, the increase in ticket sales. And it's, we talk about this a lot internally. There's this massive missed opportunity where schools are stiff arming it. And it's like, look, you have some of the biggest names in sports. And if you would allow them to actually work with you instead of trying to skirt around, you can also increase your brand awareness, brand value, brand engagement in a massive way. And I think you do a really good job of advocating for that. Particularly, we talk a lot about what you do at Iowa State. Can you talk a little bit about how that approach at Iowa State was?
Yeah, really, the light bulb moment, I guess, going through the whole NIL and maybe stepping back a little bit is, in a way, CLC was already kind of doing this. Like, you think about it, maybe not the scale of a whole entire athletic department, but you think about former players that have left and gone to the pros, or retired players that were just very recognizable, with those fan bases. We're in a way kind of doing that. Similar to like what Campus Inc. now being here over a month is how you found a way like, hey, we've been kind of doing in some semblance structuring an NIL program, but on the Greek side, but seeing the, similarities and synergies from the Greek and the structuring of that to now bringing that to NIL. So in a way, it's just trying to find a way to roll it out to an entire athletic department and all student athletes. So with Iowa State, I would say I was really excited. I was fortunate to work on some former programs with players. And again, they're not the biggest of names, but they're the biggest for Iowa State. But in some ways, they are big national brands. But you had like your Ellen Lazards, you had your Seneca Wallaces, you had George Niang, and taking their brands and connecting it already back to Iowa State. But that was a big thing is, in my conversations with them was, let's look at a key opportunity. Let's build something. Let's, continue to keep finding ways to connect your student athletes to your brand. So it was a really easy conversation. Once we kind of got over that hurdle of, all right, are we going to allow this, or do we want to be the first kind of one in the state or not? So it was pretty easy once we got over that hurdle about connecting their IP to student athletes. It was a no-brainer to begin, reaching out to select licensees, which obviously Campus Inc. was certainly top of that list to have those conversations and roll out of stores. So
for the layman's person trying to understand at home this entire licensing sphere, I know for me personally, when I joined Campus Inc., I knew nothing about it. I knew nothing about licensing. It was not my background whatsoever. I think what's so interesting to me is, I think on the blanket level, you think, oh, a license looks exactly the same at every school, which is far from the case. However many institutions, they all have licenses, but they all look at them extremely differently, which makes it quite difficult to navigate as you're working with different schools across the board. And there's so many of them. I guess I'm curious, have you seen a common thread among some of the most successful schools in terms of how they handle their license, or is it sort of different across the board?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Sean. So really, I would put almost two buckets. So you really, and there's some gray areas obviously with it, but more your Power Fives is what you're kind of seeing out there is being more strategic, I would say, with their licensing programs. Some have, I guess depends on what their level. If it's more about kind of collecting a guaranteed, check from a licensee and kind of what they would call in the industry like a primary apparel model, where you have one licensee that you would sign, and then you have kind of additional ones to fill in some of the space where they might not be able to produce certain types of products, or if it's adding different brands. So with your Power Fives, obviously, as you can imagine, you have everyone come out of the woodwork and like wanting to partner with these schools. So the approach was to be a little bit more strategic and think through, those licensees, because you just don't want at the end of the day everyone undercutting everyone else on the price and driving it down, because all the royalties are based either on that wholesale or retail price. So that was kind of the strategy with a lot of more your Power Fives. The ones that are kind of maybe on that lower spectrum, maybe the 30 and below, would maybe take a different approach, where They might have a semblance of, some strategies to be a little bit more strategic, maybe in certain places like your mass channel. So your Walmarts, your Targets, Costco's, Sam's Clubs, where they've already signed exclusivities with certain licensees. And so it just made sense to maybe go into some sort of an exclusive with those because they already had that market share. When you're dealing with a lot of those more group of 5 mid-major size, really the idea is like, I just want to get my brand out there. What licensees are willing to maybe take I don't want to say gamble, but, are they willing to, add my license and help push our product out to certain retailers that we want to be in? So as our role, when I was a brand manager and director, it was kind of, again, my space was really the group of 5 mid-major, with the exception of like Iowa State, like Adam said. And really, it was just trying to find unique opportunities to help tell the story of the school to those licensees, because there's you uncover some of those, there's some passionate fan bases where, again, I'm a Midwest kid, there's not a lot going on. We're not dealing with, fashion like they might be in LA or a lot big pro sports teams. They're very passionate about their pro team, and that might be their college in their state. So it was pretty easy sell, but when you unravel and cover like some of those fan bases and how exciting they are and want to connect through product to their favorite team, it was a pretty easy sell. And then it was just almost taking some of those guinea pigs. Like, I'll use North Dakota State, shout out to Troy Gorgren there, awesome school, and really how, just if you would really truly understand NDSU and their passion fan base in Fargo, they love their Bisons. It was a pretty easy sell once you just test the waters with it.
I think it's really interesting when you talk about like, this is a lot of kind of how the sausage gets made in the industry, right? Like, licensing is essentially about ownership. Who licensed, who owns, who has access to, your brand or IP. And one thing that you mentioned was, who has exclusivity in certain channels. And this is something we deal with a lot. And, you see a lot of these bigger programs who, with maybe some of these legacy partners, have locked up exclusivity in certain channels for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. And
Adam,
so,
sometimes of that. What's an example?
So an example would be,
we're on a podcast. We can be vulnerable. Call it out.
Sure. An example would be, hey, we want to go work with, a particular school. And they say, man, we love your model. Our women's soccer team is not getting jerseys, and they have been banging down our door like crazy. You will do soccer jerseys for us, and you're going to pay them that much? Holy cow, we have to have that. And we say, great. Well, we're ready to build it. We're ready to sell it. And they say, shoot, we actually have an existing partner who has licensed everything, and they have exclusivity in this channel, so you actually can't sell it there. Man, what are we going to do? So they go back to that partner and they say, hey, we need women's soccer jerseys. And that partner says, just not worth our time. Now you're in a position where there's nothing available in the market. You have a partner that wants to do it, is willing to do it. But because of these kind of pre-existing exclusivities in, different sales channels, or whether it be e-commerce or use of certain marks, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place of not being able to actually supply something to the market. And, I think with the change of NIL, that's where you've started to see maybe it wasn't so awesome locking up, 15, 20-year exclusivities where you basically handed the keys to your brand over to somebody who now says, I get to decide what's for sale and what's not for sale, not you anymore. Do you see that? Like with the licensing, have you seen that started to shift a little bit of people wanting to move away from those long-term exclusive lockups?
No, I think if anything, Adam, like getting in just specific licensing, I think if we learned anything from COVID was, all right, who was able, the disruption in, supply chain and distribution and getting product, like that was a huge issue. So if you think about some of those schools that might have signed exclusivities where, you're having roughly 25 to 30 different licensees, handling your product. It was kind of a rush, like who can just get me product in the store? So I think some of them have revisited those opportunities, and it might be adding more licenses in because they just couldn't get product in time, or just get the standard product out there. So I think if anything, we could see a shift in that of some of those exclusivities, just those those guarantees, because it's all about, are they able to get the product in time to the stores? Because then at the end of the day, the fans are the ones that have to suffer on that. Because
exactly.
Of that.
I think what Adam just described is what we call the good old boys club. So good old boys, as you're listening to this, you've probably gotten a message from me challenging your moral compass in NIL, because I'm very I'm very deliberate.
I mean, Steven, you make a good point though, because at the end of the day, though, right? Who's left holding the bag? It's the athletes and the fans, because we get the messages all the time saying, "Oh my gosh, what the heck? Where's this jersey? Oh, are you kidding me? It's designed like that. Why couldn't you do the on-field?" And there's this like customer education of like, well, we would do the on-field. We have the capability of doing the on-field. No one will let us do the on-field, and the ones who have the rights to it won't do it themselves either. So the only people that are left holding the bag are the fans, because there's not good enough product in the market for them, or the athletes, because now they don't have a jersey for sale, or they don't have the ability. I'm going to explain this a little bit longer. You hear a lot of people who say, we never sign athletes to exclusive deals. Great. Good for you. However, you have created an ecosystem where there's only one retailer or one producer that has the rights to that product. So you didn't sign the athlete to an exclusive deal, but you created an ecosystem that is 100% exclusive, that if they want something, they have to go through one channel.
Yeah, you gave them their own sandbox.
Exactly.
And they have
Steven,
to
you described this really well as Kodak. There's almost nothing new in any industry, right? That most of the challenges, most of the problems have been experienced by one industry or another. Maybe not directly, but indirectly. Steven talks about Kodak moments, and as industries change, as industries innovate, the problems that they face are almost never 100% unique to that industry, that company. Most of the time, they've been experienced, solved, dealt with, at least in a theoretical perspective, in any other industry. The late, great Kobe Bryant would talk about this all the time. He developed his Mamba mentality because of watching other leaders, other high performers, other high achievers in other industries. And he would talk all the time about like, hey man, this is how I play basketball. If you want to be great, you may not be great at basketball. Don't look at what I did, look at how I did it. And that's an example of greatness. The Kodak moment is the opposite of that. So with the expansion of or development of new technology, digital cameras started to have this incredible, not resurgence, but an incredible emergence. And major camera companies were moving away from film. Kodak took the hardline stance of, sure, that cute little digital thing, good for you guys. We'll dabble in it a little bit, but film is going nowhere. Film is here to stay. We will never move away from film. And all they did was develop this little pocket camera that, was a digital camera, but they essentially doubled down on their film business. And at the time, they were the de facto industry leader in high quality cameras. Well, history shows, beyond a shadow of a doubt, most of you probably don't even have a Kodak anymore. Some of you listening may not even know what Kodak is, but that was a critical error of their leadership wanting to double down on a way that this is the way the industry is. This is the way that it works. This is how we know people like taking pictures, like developing pictures, and had a complete inability to see, no, things are changing. This new technology, this new capability, the new way that the industry is interacting with their photos and wanting to share their photos, the ecosystem has shifted, and their inability to shift with that ecosystem essentially put a nail in the coffin of them being an industry leader. And
Adam, they almost silenced it.
100%.
I mean,
Yeah.
they developed it 20, 25 years prior and just silenced it. It's almost like the NCAA perhaps putting NIL on the shelf for the last 25 years until it surfaced.
It's interesting to see some of those parallels. And, I was at the Chicago Sports Summit yesterday with a lot of great sports leaders. And one thing that continues to irk me is when people say, oh, yeah, this new NIL legislation. No. There was NIL legislation. There were bylaws from the beginning. The NCAA actively said, we know you have a name, image, and likeness. We know what those rights are. However, if you want to participate in this ecosystem, you will sign those over to us and you will forfeit your right. And even beyond that, be expressly prohibited from monetizing off your NIL. So to your point, Stephen, it isn't this passive, oh, we didn't know that this was going to happen. It was an active blocking of your ability to monetize that.
Eric, I have a question. So a lot of these legacy license holders that have these licenses tied up, right, in certain segments that they know they're not going to be able to support, now they're hurting athletes directly with those decisions. How were they just so loosely written that no one saw NIL coming to change it? Shouldn't shouldn't those contracts, when there's new legislation on like a government level, like supersede or make them reset or rethink them? Like, how do they just, I know you're not a lawyer per se, but like,
right.
How is that okay?
Yeah, I think, there will have to be some changes done. Just how, you sign or you have student athletes under a school and how they can kind of strong arm them on opportunities. I don't know, following along, I think eventually, you're probably going to see something where you have, try to do a semblance of a players association or something like that, where, there's going to be a voice for student athletes. And I think you're seeing reports of that trying to come together, but it's so, as you guys know, like the NCAA and schools is so fragmented. Like, as you guys experience it on like the licensing end, what you have for one school could be completely different. And then you got all these different mindsets too of how they might view NIL or different licenses. But I think there has to be something, a voice for all the student athletes. And I think eventually it sounds like there might be something coming down the pipeline. But again, I don't know how far along that might be, or how quickly. But that's where you can't just take, and I know, Adam, this, you can't just take the pro models and just put it in the college. It just doesn't work. Everyone's separate. It's not like an overall, like I look at it from the licensing. You don't just sign the NFL and you get all the teams. Like NCAA, you sign each individual school. Depends on what agency they're with. You got to find all that out too. And then each school will make a decision on behalf of their institution. But then, like, where does that student athlete get a voice? So I think that's where there should be something. And I think, I don't know, maybe I struck another nerve too. So
no, that is 100% the question that is the crux of all this. Where does the student athlete get a voice? And that's where we've seen no fewer than 10 bills get brought to Capitol Hill. Ryan Baker, CBS, says, the more bills that get brought to Capitol Hill, the worse it usually is, because the more convoluted and confusing it gets.
And Adam spoke on this panel yesterday. Before him was Danny Wirtz, chairman of the Blackhawks.
The Blackhawks,
right? There was an owner of the WNBA Stars. So Adam's there on stage, just putting on a clinic. It was wonderful.
I blacked out. I didn't even know what happened.
I was sitting in the front row with like my phone. I'm like, am I that person right now?
Proud dad.
I know him.
Proud dad moment. I had to block Steven out so I didn't get distracted.
It was just like, tell the people like, oh man, it was incredible. This is really cool. I think, part of what makes campusing special, we say, we have a bus and we put people on the bus and we try to get them in the right seats. And Eric, you are like one of those people where you bring us a wealth of knowledge. Your reputation is incredible. We're learning from you. beyond measure. But by you joining us, you are raising the bar in the licensing space for everyone. And I think there's
100%.
an example to be set there where, your previous employer is one of, we're customers of them. But believe it or not, because of it, it's a 1 + 1 is 3 now. Like, we're going to be able to do so much cooler shit together because of it, because of you kind of taking this leap of faith and joining us. And so I hopefully you'll start to see this a little bit more happening. You're not the only one joining us, but that's what we want to be at Campus Inc. is this melting pot of just extremely incredible professionals with so much integrity and such different skill sets that we can come together to change something. So I think this is pretty rad.
Eric, I have probably the most important question of the whole pod left to ask you. If you could sign your dream NIL deal with any restaurant today, what would that restaurant be?
That's a good one. Wow, I haven't been asked that one.
Told you, most important question of the pod.
Yeah, I'm a big Chipotle guy. Like,
There
I
it is.
could, sign me a Chipotle deal for life. I'd be good for lunch. Get some chips and burritos on, at dinner time. Sign me up.
Road trips.
I'll be right. You're covered. Parties. We got the whole layout. So sign me a Chipotle deal and I'll be good. But
I love it. I love it. The
I
ultimate
national. I want a national one. If I'm going to do a deal, I don't want it just local. I want a national deal.
I was about to say the ultimate utilitarian deal right there. It's good for any occasion, anywhere you are in the country. Chipotle, hit them up. Eric Hrubes. That's awesome. I love it. Wonderful conversation. Thanks for taking us to school as it relates to licensing. Once again, I'm Adam. There's Sean Ellenby, special guest Eric Hrubes. In this episode 5, season 2 of the NIL show. We will catch you guys next time.